So what I've heard, Rog, is anything and everything you know about refereeing is gold dust, and anything else is not worth knowing about, right?
Not at all, Ben, not at all. Everybody involved in sport to understand that officials are just as passionate, sometimes more passionate than they are about the sport they're involved in, and just to give them that slack and respect to understand that.
Hello and welcome to the YesRef Podcast with me, Olly Ballinger.
And me, the co-host, Ben Williamson.
Ben, how are you, mate?
Shattered, mate. I need a little break, I think, but I'm good. You?
Yeah, not too bad. The weather's looking a little bit grim.
More importantly, though, Roger Vaughan, how are you, sir?
Very well, thank you, gents. Very well. Thank you for
Good.
inviting me on.
Hey, no problem. Love to have you here. Thanks for coming.
Good, thank you.
Roger, tell our guests a little bit about who you are and your background, because I think you've got a little experience in the game.
Yeah, thanks, Olly. Yeah, so Roger Vaughan, as you know, I am the CEO in Dorset now, where I've been for 3 months. Prior to that, I worked at Gloucestershire FA as referee development officer and inclusion lead for 6 years, and before that I worked at the FA as a national manager and as a regional manager before that, and I was at the FA for a period of 14 years, believe it or not. So we've been lucky enough to work in the game for over 20 years now, but outside of that I've been involved in refereeing for over 30 years. Started in North Somerset as a referee locally, was lucky enough to progress through to be an assistant on the Football League and as a level 2A referee on the conference for 4 years as well. So and now I'm observing at that level where I've been for the last 13 years as a match observer for the PGMO. And outside of that, very much involved in referee development as a referee developer for the FA, as a referee developer trainer, nice short title that they've come up with there, and various other roles in mentoring and coaching refereeing. So refereeing's certainly been my main role within the game, but now, as I say, as CEO, seeing a much broader aspect in Dorset, which I'm thoroughly enjoying, I have to say.
So what I've heard, Rog, is anything and everything you know about refereeing is gold dust, and anything else is not worth knowing about, right?
Not at all, Ben. Not at all. I think when you've spent a long time in a particular aspect of the game, i.e. refereeing, there is a danger that that's obviously going to cloud your outlook going forward. But I'd like to think, my sort of knowledge, I am a level 2 coach as well, which I did many moons ago. So I've coached locally, mainly with my kids' teams. So I've seen that side of the fence. And I'd like to think, with my involvement in the game, that I have a broadish view of it. I can see other people's viewpoints. And actually now, obviously, as CEO, you have to. So I've learned a lot about the workings of facilities and football development, a lot more now in the last few months than prior to that. But certainly, again, my involvement in the team at Gloucestershire gave me that opportunity as well. So, yeah, I've got a broad outlook, but obviously always a referee bias. Yeah, you never lose that, Ben.
I love that. And we'll touch on your new role a little later on. But firstly, I want to go back to the very beginning journey. Why did you start what year did you start refereeing, if you can remember it and you don't mind sharing?
Yeah. It was way back in the last century. 1989 I first started refereeing, believe it or not. And
I wasn't alive.
No, I wasn't alive either. Yeah, I was -2.
Yeah, all right, you're making me feel really old now, guys. Thanks. No, my involvement was very much sort of linked to the fact my dad was a referee, only very much at local level, but he was involved with the RA, and he was also involved in instructing, as it was in the days, not tutoring, in Somerset, and he twisted my arm at that time to say, "Oh, why don't you come on the refs course, Rog?" And I said, "Oh, yeah." So I sort of, as you do, you try and keep your dad on side, don't you? So I said, "Yeah, okay, I'll go along to it." Never with any intention of doing any more than attending the course, having something on my CV and going on from there. So that's what I did. First,
What was the referee course like back then? What did
well, it
I'm
was.
assuming it's very different to what
It
it is
was.
now.
It was. I mean, Western RA used. So this was a time again where the RAs were very influential in referee instructing at the time. So it was through the RAs that courses tended to be run. So the counties were. They would sort of oversee it, but they were very much reliant on the RAs to go ahead and deliver that. So what would happen is the counties would nominate people to go on what was the National Instructors Course there, which was something that was run in Lincoln at the time at a college called the wonderful title Bishop Grosset College in Lincoln was where they used to run the course. Yeah,
they've got a university now. We work with them.
Oh right, do you? Right, well, there you go. So you know of them then. So, but again, it was a decent venue, but we used to run it during the school holidays. So again, it was if you went on the course. I remember when I first went on it, sort of late 90s. It was taking. I worked for AXA then, and it was taking time off work to go up there. So that was the way it worked. But yeah. So the course, going back to your original question, Ben, was very much theory. It was delivered over a number of weeks, normally in a club or a pub, above a pub. I mean, the Western one used to be delivered above a pub in Western, and it was all theory. No practical involvement at all. Yeah, going through the laws, real verbatim. So what you ended up with was at the end of it to test your competence was you had a written paper and an oral paper. So the written paper, you had to, I can't remember what the percentage was, 75% you used to have to get on that, I think. And then the oral was something similar. And the oral, they used to have a series of examiners that would basically run through it with you. And I remember what you used to end up with there was referees with a very good knowledge of law, because you had to know law to get through your exam at the end of it. But when it came to practical application, well, you never blew a whistle until your first game, and you know around positioning and movement, all the sort of things we take for granted that we cover on our courses now was never touched on. So it was very much a sort of learning when you went out there. Hopefully having a bit of support when you did that, but again, mentoring was quite sparse, I think would be the fair way to describe it. I mean, mentoring now is not great, but I'll be the first to admit that. But I think it's a lot better now than it was at that time. And it was very much a case of you used to get guys that were great in terms of their theory. They could sort of get 95% on the exam because they knew law, and so that you put them out on a field to actually start applying it, and they were like fish out of water. They really, really struggled.
Do you think we might have gone slightly the other way now? Do we focus enough on law and not practical?
Ben, yeah, I think that, we probably have gone a little bit too far the other way. I think don't get me wrong, the practical element is absolutely key, but I do think there is a reliance now. I think the pre-course modules are really good, but I still think there is still some gaps in knowledge of law when people go out there, and that of course only comes to light, unfortunately, when they're out there and they're doing the first games. And I've certainly found that when I was RDO at Gloucestershire, and I've had that sort of feedback from other RDOs as well, where there is some gaps that we would take for granted in terms of knowledge of law that people aren't doing. I mean, I'll give you an example. I mean, obviously, sin bins is something that is covered. There is that module to cover beforehand, and there is reference to it on the course. But with the best will in the world, you're not covering it in the detail perhaps you need to. And we've had referees applying the sin bin rationale to everything. So every caution is a sin bin, and of course we all know that that's not right in law, and it causes a massive headache when that then comes to light after a game. So
I guess like cup competitions and stuff as well. Causes issues, and
absolutely. People looking for replays because referees have been wrong in law. They've lost players. they'd gone down to 10 men. It's cost them the game. And actually, it was a free kick, and it was
I
a
don't
reckless
envy
challenge.
the youth that have to try and remember.
Yeah.
Caution's in bin,
Yeah.
not in
Yeah.
bin. He's added another one. I don't envy that
There
whatsoever.
is a lot to think about, Ben. You're absolutely right. However, what I will say is, I mean, you look at the misconduct process now compared to when I started, and you were cautioning players and you were having to write out caution reports and explain what had happened, send off reports, and then send them in triplicate. I always remember doing a game, I think it was a Western League game at Melksham. I mean, I had not surprisingly for me at Melksham on the day, I had a few cautions, and I think I had to send in triplicate, something like 10 forms, and I had to, it cost me a fortune in postage just to send it to Wilts FA, and it was just, and that was it. So now when you look at where we are with the whole game system, and obviously with MOAS at higher levels, and the ability to enter misconduct through that is just a godsend. So in that respect, I do say, you never know how lucky you are with that, but of course, that's just with technological developments anyway. Look at yourselves, what you're able to do, and I think that's something that people take for granted now that they're going to have that. So, but again, that's another avenue. Misconduct, we don't cover that in a great deal of detail because we can't. We send out stuff, but again, we're reliant on them picking up the thread and actually being able to access whole game and do what we want them to do, etc., etc. So yeah, lots of challenges. So I wouldn't disagree with your thoughts about maybe having a look at how we deal with some of that stuff and maybe still giving them a little bit more knowledge and not just focusing on the practical element, which is really important. But it's like anything, you can't referee practically unless you've got that knowledge base to start with, really. So it's always a balance. Yeah.
One of my favourite parts to tutoring the courses is the section where you go, right, let's all understand how we blow a whistle. And I always put a smile on my face when people go, no, because it looks really easy to blow the whistle, right? When you watch the referees, right, you go, yeah, this is comfortable. And then the spectrum that you get, from people being able to blow that whistle, like, it does put a smile on your face, and
it does. And again, you think of that, Ollie, and think back to the day when we didn't do any of that until the first time they went out. Can you imagine what someone was like blowing that whistle to get the captains in, and your captain's like, "Did someone blow a whistle?" It's like, what's that?
I think it's also the same with the flag. I don't know if you agree. When you do the assistant referee bit on the referee's course, you give them the flag, and I always give everybody a minute, 90 seconds to like whip the flag around so they can hear all the noises it makes when you're smashing it about, because they love doing it. And I'm like, right, all out of your system. Can we actually do some real throwing signals and stuff now? And they're whipping it around and like spinning them about.
Yeah,
okay, great. Yeah, can we move on now? Can we do some real flagging?
You've had your plate. Now we want to get on. Yeah. No, you're right.
Sorry, but I don't tutor football. I focus on futsal, so we don't need to worry about that.
No.
Well, at least you know what I mean, Rog.
I know what you mean. Ben. Yeah.
Speaking of different sports, we know each other, Roger, from a little way back, and I probably owe you a rather large thanks, to be honest, because you were the man who introduced me to the game futsal, tutoring the course back in 2007 in a little room in the Olympiad in Chippenham, if memory serves.
But that's a while back now, isn't it, Ollie? Crikey, yeah. Remember it well, mate. Remember it well, yeah. And it's it was great. And again, you look at, and I'm really pleased that you've gone on to where you are now. And I often think back to when I was dealing with futsal at the FA. And it's quite funny because I inherited small-sided football, which then obviously futsal took over really in time, and the small-sided committee. So I used to sit on that at the FA, and it all came about when a guy called Barry G. I don't know if you've ever come across Barry, but Barry was one of the, when we first came on board as regional managers, he was one of he took over from I'm trying to think of the guy who left in the Northwest, but there was a little bit of a turnaround early doors. Barry came in, but then of course the team shrunk quite quickly, and Barry unfortunately left us really quickly. But when he left, we'd all got national bits to pick up on as well. And he had small-sided football. So when he left, Ian sort of said, I think it might be John Baker, actually, would you like to do small-sided football? Oh, yeah, fine, crack it. So I picked up that. So I had my national responsibility at that time was the incentive scheme, if you remember that. So I was sort of looking after that.
Vaguely.
And then I picked up this as well, and the rest is history, as they say. So I have to say, I really enjoyed my involvement with futsal, Ollie. I always found it was a struggle, though, to give futsal the credit it deserved and the support it deserved, and it's a credit to the likes of yourself and Mark and Peter Nurse and people like that you've all gone on to where you have. I mean, you look at what Mark's achieved in the game when you think about how the game wasn't really being massively supported by the FA. When you look at how the England team themselves were doing, and then Mark all of a sudden referees the World Cup final, and it's just, I mean, that in itself, I've sort of said to other people, Mark refereeing the World Cup final is a bit like a referee from San Marino sort of going to do the World Cup final from a footballing context, in that he's come from a country that is not great in futsal terms at all, as England weren't, to go on and do the biggest game in the world, which is brilliant, fantastic. And that's credit to him and his ability to go on and do that, to be fair to him. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a great analogy, that, by the way, fantastic analogy. And he's absolutely trailblazed the path for new upcoming futsal referees.
He has.
And he's trailblazed that across Europe and across the world.
He has, and I think, and again, it's I really take my hat off to him to what he's achieved. And as I say, the announcement the other week, but that he's gone in to do a role now as in the FA as Lou's got a maternity leave. I think it's a great opportunity, and one he thoroughly deserves, which is great.
I think it's almost every kind of coach's or tutor's dream, Roger, isn't it? That we turn up to a referee's course, or we do some laws of the game, or we mentor somebody in their first few games or whatever, and then several years later, we find out that they are at the pinnacle of their sport. In officiating terms, that must be a great sense of pride for you,
Definitely, Ben, and I think it was, as I've alluded to, and futsal at that time, there was, I think the best way to describe it, there were people supporting it nationally, and there were a lot of enthusiasts, as Ollie will know of, that were really pushing the game, and they were doing a great job. But actually, the amount of genuine support we were getting was mixed, to be fair. And I think, don't get me wrong, the FA have obviously got a lot of things to support, and a lot of key areas of focus. And unfortunately, futsal never quite got to that top table. I mean, obviously the England team was supported and developed and was starting to do well. And then, of course, that all changed as well. And here we are now, a few years later, and we're trying to progress again. But it is a challenge, and I think the problem is, it's like all the other formats of the game that the FA support. There's only so much they can do. I mean, you look at how the women's game has developed. I think that's fantastic. But again, people forget, how much time, effort, and resource has gone in to get the women's team to where they are. And if you're going to do that with futsal, it would need the same. It would need a lot of resourcing to get it up to where some of the top nations in the world are, and we were always playing catch up. I think it is interesting, though, and I know you guys are involved with the Premier League and what they do with the tournaments now. But I think it does show a little bit of how the game is viewed when you look at Premier League academies are obviously having these futsal tournaments, and they see the benefit of the game to their younger players in developing their technique and their ability. And you look at the top nations, the South American nations, and Spain, and Italy, and see how they've developed futsal and how it's supported their 11-a-side game as well. And I think there's still a lot to be said for that, Ollie, and I'm sure you see that yourself, mate, to be fair.
Yeah, for sure. And like, the game itself is tremendous for a player growing up. You only have to look at the likes of Ronaldo and Messi, and you go, wow, the ability and confidence they have dribbling the ball. But also, refereeing futsal is also a fantastic tool, because if 11-a-side is your pathway and that's where you want to go, but doing a 3-year stint in futsal refereeing, it'll do you tremendous. Good, because the game's faster. You've got different movements. It's more akin to an assistant referee. but there are things that you can transfer across, and it will make you better.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, managing two different laws of the game is
Yeah.
a little
Yeah.
bit
Oh,
challenging.
crikey! I'll
I'm
take
not
my hat
clever
off.
enough. I'd
Yeah.
end up starting doing some of this counting stuff for a goal kick. I can't. I'd love to be able to do both. I am not clever enough.
Yeah. I mean, it's ironic, Ollie. I assessed Tom. Oh, his name's gone out of my head. Who's the Premier League lad who did futsal?
Bramall, yeah, Tom Bramall.
So I assessed Tom on a FA Cup game, Southampton and Grimsby last year. Do you remember when Grimsby knocked them out? So Tom was doing that game, and I think he said to me beforehand, he said, the last time I saw you, Rog, you said you were watching me on a futsal game, and I said, yeah, I think that's probably right. And I said to him, I said, I take my hat off to you. I must admit, at the time he was doing well in his futsal, but obviously the rest is history in terms of what he's achieved, 11 aside. And I said, fair play to you. But, you look at that, and you look at, what's his name in Sheffield? Who's the guy, Football League referee in Sheffield, who again did futsal? I'm just trying to think of his name's gone right out of my head. But there's some really good examples. And Mark himself, of course, was involved in 11-a-side. I think Mark was level 4. I think he got to, might have been level 3 before he decided to focus on futsal. So I think there's definitely some real benefits from doing both, and when you decide to focus on one, the benefits of doing the other one are there for all to see. And Tom Bramall was a great example, a very good referee. I was very impressed when I saw him last year. So
Yeah.
So it's
great
good.
Yeah.
So, Roger, you've touched on it a few times, your role as National Referee Manager at the FA. And I think you're in charge of recruitment, retention and development.
I was, that nice small area, Ben.
Very small area. And obviously that correlated with a similar role that you took on at Gloucester a few years later.
Yeah.
What's is there many differences between the national agenda and the local agenda? What were the challenges?
I think the difference is obviously the national agenda. You're looking to support and mould what the counties are aspiring to achieve, really. So I think what I'd like to think is both areas now are moving away from just the numbers game, if I can call it that. I think in the past there was always a focus on getting as many referees recruited as possible. And I think certainly what we tried to work on when I was involved nationally with it was actually to be a bit more scientific about the way we recruit, to try and focus on the areas where we needed to recruit. So there was a time, of course, where we were looking at coverage of games and using that measurement to influence where you were recruiting, focusing on the areas where you needed referees and so on and so forth. And whilst I know that we've gone away from that nationally now, I still think there is certainly some sense in doing that. The bottom line is, it's very easy for counties to deliver courses, one a month in a certain venue, or and get everyone to come to you. Which okay, you'll always get the numbers. If you speak to any RDO, they'll tell you if you advertise a course, you will be able to fill it with younger referees quite easily. Your 14, 15, 16-year-olds. But actually, we all know that the people we really want to get into refereeing are the older people, male and female, that have got a bit of life experience, hopefully some football experience, and then can bring that into their refereeing, because experience tells us whether they're doing youth or adult football, they are the ones that will give it a bit of a go. They are the ones that, because they've got the life skills, will easily adapt to going into refereeing and be able to develop accordingly. And they are the ones that further down the line in 5 years' time will probably still be with us if we look after them. Whereas the 14, 15, 16-year-olds, you're going to get some exceptions who will be there, and they are there definitely, and we have to look after them because they're like diamonds, the ones that are really good at a young age and want to stick at it. Unfortunately, though, a lot of the others, they're still playing the game, and there is always that balance. There's also, of course, when they go to 16, then you have GCSEs, you have further and higher education, you have employment, you're getting into relationships and all the other things that come along that are going to make things challenging for them to stay within refereeing. If you keep them at the end of all that, then they are going to stick with you.
So on
but
that
it's
note,
more
then,
challenging.
how do you get more? How do we recruit? How do we attract more adults into officiating? And I think that it will probably be the same across all sport.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's that $64 million question, Ben. Really, it's to be honest with you, it was a challenge when I was at the FA. It's still a challenge. Here we are, sort of 10 years later, really looking at it, because I think now the way football has developed. So particularly when you look at people who traditionally would have retired from playing the game, shall we say, in their mid to late 30s now. Of course, now with the advent of vets football and now walking football, there are other ways that they can continue their playing career a lot longer than they would have done, which again, unfortunately, is to referees' loss, because some of those people would have drifted into refereeing. I think you have to work with clubs and leagues. That clubs know their players, leagues know their clubs, and I think you've got to work really closely with them to find out where there is some interest. I think certainly there's been some success. Many moons ago, I was involved in putting together some sort of club referee courses. I remember, when I was involved in volunteering in Somerset, we had club referees courses for our local adult leagues there, and the idea was just give them a little bit of knowledge, because more often than not, most teams were going to be without a referee, certainly reserve teams and third teams. And so it's, have you got somebody in your club that can step in to do that? It's just giving them a little bit of knowledge to hopefully make their life easier when they have to do that. And then what you tend to find is, off the back of them, they are the sort of guys that will gravitate into a full referees course. So you've already got a starting point there. It's also the guys that run the line, Ben. You and I know that the best club assistants, the ones that are really proud of the job they do week in, week out for their clubs, again, tend to be the ones that we can gravitate into refereeing as well, because they've already got that passion for doing that little bit of officiating. But we have to work hard with them, because again, there's not hundreds of them, but again, it's that little bit of extra work in targeting the right areas can help you, I think, without a shadow of a doubt. The FA, we obviously did national programs to try and address this, and now we've got programs as well trying to talk about referees from minority areas as well, in getting involved in it. And from a female point of view now, obviously with the development of women's football and girls' football, as we touched on, I think now you're seeing a situation where you are getting players now who are coming towards the end of their playing careers looking to move into refereeing. I mean, you look at Rebecca, you look at Stacey Pearson that have played the game at a good level, gravitating into refereeing and have moved into it really, really well, because they've got that knowledge of the game. They get what's going on, and I think that really helps. I mean, if you look at I think
just one thought, Roger, if I may, just to interject, just before we touch on the minority things. I think from my experience, the recruitment and the development opportunities that I think the FA deliver, both locally and nationally, I think is one of their strengths. Like, they can recruit referees really well. And I think the development opportunities today to support referees is tremendous. I mean, like, just comparing that back to when I was a referee, like, it's incredible what you get. I think where it's potentially got room for some growth is like the retention. Like, how do you keep that referee who's in for 2 years? How can you extend their life another 12 months? And it's just trying to work out how you do that and why. And for some reason we know why, but what can we do to make it
without a doubt, retention has always been a challenge, and with some of the poor behaviour that we've had since the COVID break, obviously, I think certainly since then the stats are there across the country to show that discipline's not been great for everybody, nationally and at every county level. So that has had challenges, and that's definitely made it harder to retain all of our referees. Some referees have left us off the back of their experiences, and again, that's something we need to work on to address that. And I think the FA are obviously moving in that direction. You look at some of the punishments this year now, and actually, moving towards point deduction. I think that's, I've always maintained that punishments from a discipline perspective within football, when they're financial, will always have a limited effect. Ultimately, people will carry on paying. The history is out there to show that will happen. But when you start hitting teams and clubs and individuals in the area that affects them most, i.e., their ability to win things, or actually to be able to stay at a certain level because they've suddenly lost points because of their poor discipline, then that's a totally different kettle of fish. And if you look at, I know when Fraser Williamson came to speak to us about it, he used the analogy of Derby, and when Derby got relegated and the points deduction that had, and actually if they hadn't had such a severe points deduction, they would have stayed in the Championship, and so the impact of that was massive, and it just showed, and he basically used that as an example of what can happen when you get points deductions. So it's an interesting one, and I think that one's going to develop further. But certainly, I think we have to look after our referees from a retention point of view. So that's one area. I think we've got to, and one of the things I know the PGMO are trying to do and the FA are trying to do now is make refereeing, human, if you like, and try and get people to understand that referees are as passionate about football as anybody else in the game, and they don't go out there to upset you on a day. They might make a decision that you don't agree with, but that's part and parcel of the game. Passion is what drives us all within football, but you've got to control it. And I think, equally we have to look after our referees to keep them and develop them. So yeah, I think the focus on retention is really, really key, Ollie. And I think any initiative that we're able to develop to improve that has got to be the right one, because it's, as you've already alluded to, we can recruit referees quite easily, but to actually develop a referee who's been with us for 5 years is much, much harder. You can't replace that experience. So once someone's gone, you've lost all that experience that they've developed within the game, and the skills and the attributes that they've picked up along the way. And that's irreplaceable.
I loved your comment around like the referees are so passionate about the game too, and I just wonder in sport in general if players, spectators, coaches understand that enough that we're not here just to be annoying, to be awkward, whatever. We're here because we absolutely love what we do and we love the sport that we're officiating. And I think a part of what sport needs to realise is exactly what you've said, that the officials are just so passionate about the game, and we're just passionate in a slightly different way. Like, I love football, but I'm a rubbish player. Like, I cannot kick it. I haven't even got 2 left feet. I'm that bad. Apologies to people that are left-footed. You're probably the opposite to you guys. But yeah, so passionate. We love what we do, and that's why we train, and that's why we go out, and that's why we develop ourselves. But I'm not sure that understanding of we love the game too is shared across.
No, you're right, and again, I know the FA are looking to do some work around that, but it has to go out there, and you're right. I mean, you work across, all other sports, but everyone's the same. You talk to any match official in any sport, they're not involved to upset someone. They're involved because they love that particular sport and they have a passion for that sport. And that's it. I mean, whenever I deliver a course, I talk to the level I got as a referee and as an assistant referee, and as an observer now. And I say I would never ever have been anywhere near the professional game as a player or a coach.
No. So
I just when the times I've gone out and run the line in some big crowds, probably the biggest crowd I've St Mary's in a championship game, 33,000 at St Mary's, and the hairs in the back of your neck are standing up. Ben, you've been in some big games yourself. You have, Ollie, where you go out and you think, this is what it's all about. This is why I do this, to be involved in games like this. And you're right, and that's it. So it's
special moment.
Yeah, it is. You're right, and it's always great to remember that, and I think that's the point I would always say to referees is think about that time where you've been involved in the biggest game you've been involved in, and you walked out. Then how did you feel? And even better, if the game's gone swimmingly, how you felt when you came off there. You got the majority of the players are shaking your hand, and you think, I've been part of that. I've been part of that really nice game of football, really good game of football, whatever. And I think that's the sort of memories we want people to keep, because that will then drive them on the following week, not to throw the kit bag at the cat and to go
share
out
that
and
with those new ones that are on the course,
correct.
right? So that you can have this experience too.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Just going back briefly, just because we picked it up, you've spent some time as a diversity and inclusion manager. We touched on minority groups. Like, what's been like one of your highlights? How did you get into it, and what do you think the importance is? I've thrown a couple at you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, again, that was a role that when I was national manager at the FA, I led on inclusion. So again, I have to say I'm absolutely delighted now to see how that is developed within the FA. Now they have a national manager responsible for inclusion with Raj there, who again has started really well, and he's sending all the right messages and highlighting the importance of it. The biggest importance for me, Ollie, is that if we don't manage to get our message out to all the communities in the country, we are missing out on a massive pool of potential. That's the biggest thing, really. And like I say, you look at the number of players from minority ethnic groups that are playing the game. The same opportunity should be there for those people to officiate the game as well, and that's the bottom line. And unfortunately, the correlation between the numbers has not been there in the past. And again, we are moving in that direction now. And there are some great opportunities for officials moving in that direction. So I think for me, within Gloucestershire, one of my highlights when I was here was, and I know the guys have had an event this week, the first physical Black History Month event, but we did a few online versions during lockdown. And they were really, really successful. So Sam Allison is a good friend of mine. In Wiltshire, we got Sam involved and talked about his journey in the game. We got some key players from the FA involved as well. Steve Smithies, who's now the CEO in Cheshire, bumped into Steve the other week. Again, he's a great advocate for the work in EDI, and all different people across the board. We delivered an online event, and we were sort of commended by the FA for doing something during lockdown that had a lot of interest. And because it was online, we were able to attract people from outside of the county to get involved in it. So that was really, really great. As I said, they've had a physical event here last week. We had the Black Awards evening here recently, which again I was involved in setting up before I moved to Dorset, and I know Matt Boucher did a great job in leading on that, and that was something that was held at Ashton Gate. Derek Scale, somebody I know very well, again a local coach involved in Bristol Central, was someone who received an award in the night. So again, those sort of things are happening in the county. The inclusion advisory group that I set up here is moving along well. I've got a similar group in Dorset that's driving inclusion within Dorset. So for me though, inclusion is common business sense apart from everything else, in that we are now accessing and involving people in other communities that may not otherwise have seen a place for them to be involved in football, which of course they should have. Everyone should have that opportunity to be involved. All we're trying to do is spread that message a bit broader and make sure they get that chance as and when they want it.
We had a guest on talking about EDI, and one of the comparisons analogies given was like, all of a sudden now today safeguarding is part of the conversation, like in every conversation, right? And I think we are doing a lot to get EDI part of the same conversation and just make it at the forefront of what we do. And I think if we do that, look at the success safeguarding has had. I think EDI can probably follow the same.
It's a really good analogy, Ollie. I agree with it 100%. And if you speak to anybody at the FA and in county FAs now around safeguarding, it runs through everything we do. And you're right. I mean, one of the things, funny enough, when I was at Gloucestershire, and I was leading on the inclusion group. We have a number of the directors in the county are now originally from the inclusion advisory group, which again is great that we've got people at that level who have an understanding and passion for inclusion that are involved. And that was the same point that was made, and we need to have inclusion as part of everything we do, not as an add-on. It's just runs through everything we do, and once you've got that, you're in the right place, to be fair. So
yeah, great. I think we totally agree with all of it, so which is great. Cool. So now you've moved on from your Gloucester role, and you took up the CEO of Dorset County FA, who are very, very lucky to have you. If you can, break down what does the role entail? You said you've learned more about outside of kind of the refereeing structure. What does your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, so my day-to-day, I mean, at the moment, I'm still living in North Somerset, so the family are there whilst our children sort themselves out. So the younger, my two boys are still sorting out college placements. So one of them just started at college. One of them has just started a bit of work whilst he saves up to go travelling before he decides what he's going to do next. So whilst they're sorting themselves out, I'm doing a sort of commute so I work from home on a Monday and a Friday, and then I'm travelling down to Dorset on a Tuesday morning and staying over Tuesday night and Wednesday night. So I have 3 days in the office, which cuts across everyone who's in the office. We've got two groups of staff, so a Monday to Wednesday group and a Wednesday to Friday group that are in the office. So again, we are still working in that hybrid setup as most counties are at the moment, and that's working well. The difference is, I guess, it's sort of realising that the buck stops with you, Ben. So whereas before I said, "Oh yeah, I'll just pass that on," and someone else, that's not possible anymore. I've got a fantastic, I've got a fantastic chairman who's been really supportive in the 3 months I've been there and helping me get my feet under the table. Big actor follows Sue Hoff, who is still chair of the National Game Board and chair of the women's board at the FA, and on the main FA board is still involved at that level. Sue retired, so I took over from her, and again, it's big act to follow really. So but I have to say it's I've had the opportunity to do my own thing and to put my own mark on it, and hopefully that's what we're going. So we are in the process of recruiting some new directors for our board, and we are a smaller team than obviously I worked with in Gloucestershire, but it's just having a knowledge of everything that goes on. So Dorset is a smaller county. It's a county that's got some similarities with Gloucestershire. A lot of rural areas in the county, and again some bigger sort of conurbations around the sort of Poole, sort of Bournemouth border area, and then obviously Weymouth and Dorchester, bigger towns. But
close to the beach, then, Rod.
Say again, sorry.
Close to the beach.
Absolutely, there are some nice beaches, Ollie. I'm not going to lie about that. I haven't seen any of them yet, but
right. Just down the lunch break, wander down the pier.
But yeah, it's ultimately it's still doing the same things really. As I say, the team are great in what they are able to do. So again, I've already touched about Alex and Kevin. So having a more hands-on role with safeguarding as the safeguarding lead for the county, and we talked about that a little while ago. So needing to be on the ball with stuff that goes on there. Likewise on discipline as well, having some involvement in that. But from a football development point of view, we've had some challenges around facilities. We're in the process of sorting out a new stand at the county ground and trying to work with our Hamworthy United, who are our tenants, and there's been a few challenges around that. But again, it's all learning. As I say, I've learned a lot about facilities and the process of planning and all the different challenges that come along the way. It's been quite a steep learning curve in that respect, but very, very enjoyable. I'm really enjoying it, and I can't believe I've been there 3 months, to be honest with you.
That's the main thing, enjoying it, right? And thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to jump on with us. What would you say is your biggest challenge? Your biggest short-term challenge? What is that?
Biggest short-term challenge, I guess, is making sure that we as a county FA are able to deliver against our ever-stretching FA targets, and also that there is the biggest piece of work the FA have at the moment is compliance with the code of governance. So this is a piece of work that's cutting across all aspects of county FAs and the FA, and it's been able to do that with at the same time and balancing the finances, because as ever the FA are very supportive to counties with finances, but equally, the challenges to be compliant around that become ever hard. So it's balancing the books, I guess. Ben, is probably my biggest challenge in from a financial point of view, and looking at other income streams to make sure we're able to deliver what we need to as a county. So yeah, that is an ongoing challenge, and one that
Probably a
again I've
never-ending challenge as well, right?
well, it won't, no, and you're right, it won't. I mean, every county's in the same boat. We're fortunate to have a facility there, a 3G pitch that was relayed in the summer, and that is a fantastic additional income stream. But again, it's really, really important that we have that to be able to do the things we need to do. And a lot of counties in the same boat. Some aren't so fortunate with those extra income streams and have to work a little bit harder in different areas to make sure everything is done as it needs to be. But we're, at the end of the day, we're all involved in football, and I'm always grateful for the opportunities I've had within the game, and always still the same case going forward in my new role, definitely.
Thank you, Roger. It is really insightful to understand what the outlook looks from a CEO's perspective. It's always interesting, because they are so very different. I think Ben and I have written that over the last 3 or 4 years in what we've done with YesRef in some respects, just how different one county is from the next, even though they could be neighbouring.
Yes, no, you're right, and I think that's the challenge, Ollie. Every county is different. We're all individual businesses in our own right. We've got general similarities in terms of what the FA expect us to do, but we're all unique, and we all have to adapt accordingly. And I think it's the key thing really is just making people understand that we're here to develop and support football. And whilst part of our role will always be to manage the discipline and safeguarding elements that aren't always as pleasant, but they are really key parts of what we do as well. So it's understanding that as a business we cover all sorts of avenues. Some they like to talk about, some they don't like to talk about, but we're there for all. So that's the key thing.
Yeah, no, that's tremendous, and I think that's a really strong message that we should communicate to everyone. Now, I would probably be able to talk to you and Ben would all afternoon. We could talk about football and the different roles, but in an attempt to try and wrap this up, we do save one question to the end to ask our guests, and that is, if we were to give you a magic wand, what's the one thing about sports officiating that you would like to see change?
Yeah, and do you know what? I'm going to harbour back to what we spoke about earlier, Ollie, actually, and that is really just for everybody involved in sport to understand that officials are just as passionate, sometimes more passionate than they are about the sport they're involved in, and just to give them that slack and respect to understand that they're not always going to be right, they're not always going to be perfect. But so are coaches and players are never always perfect, as we know. So it's just having that bit of empathy for what we're doing, and hopefully bring us closer together. Because the bit that still frustrates me is sometimes that them and us that I see in officiating that shouldn't be there. We all got the same aims to enjoy the sport we're involved in, and actually, if you come back to that, you're not going to go too far wrong.